Hello and welcome to The Blueprint, a Chelsea FC Tactics podcast. Soon and I are analysts on X, where we share tactical breakdowns of Chelsea matches and discuss other interesting talking points. In this podcast, we'll be doing the same, diving even deeper into the details. But before we dive in, how are you doing, Soon?
Um, I'm doing a lot well personally, but we happened to lose the game against City, didn't we? So not so happy on that front.
Yeah, straight into it because yeah, I think it's fair to say that the fan base online especially have gone into a bit of a meltdown. So yeah, we're here to discuss the game. We will try to keep it as objective as possible because we're still fans at the end of the day and we're both really frustrated. I saw your takes. I've been keeping a close eye on your takes on X. Um, I've had a lot to share as well, but I'm hoping that we can just delve a bit deeper in this episode. So yeah, let's get right into it. So could you help me and the audience break down how the game started in terms of the tactical setups for both sides, especially with Manchester City since they dominated possession. So I'd like to hear how they organize themselves and how Chelsea defensively organize as well.
Okay, the the game was quite interesting because uh I would say it was kind of a tactical chess game in that sense, because of the way both managers continue to tweak in game to try and um counter what the other manager was doing in that sense. So, well, I would say the way the game started was it was a bit here and there, but you could immediately see City, especially in possession. You could see City having their wing backs or their full backs, which were wing backs on the day, really high and wide. Then they had Foden, Marmoush, and Silva coming centrally behind Haaland to form like a 2-3-5 in that sense. The
Hmm.
midfielders in that three-man midfield was Gundogan on the left, Kovacic in centrally, while Bernardo Silva occupied like the right side of that midfield. Then Marmoush and Foden also came close to Haaland. They played in the half spaces as well. So it looked like City, I think Pep did a lot of this last season as well, where Walker stays wide, as well as Govardio doing the same thing as well. Um, Probably like the only centre back that I have seen being converted into a wing back or a fullback left winger per se. So it was a lot of central presence. City had a lot of central presence, and it was clear because of the way the profiles they started that those profiles were comfortable in central areas, the Marmoush, Foden, Benasiva and the like. So for Chelsea to counter that, Chelsea actually started in a 4-4-2, very narrow 4-4-2, where Jackson and Palmer led the press, as well as you had your wingers really narrow. And at times, the 4-4-2 was a 4-2-4. And that brings me to the argument whether Maresca set us up well, which I think he initially did, which I think he did initially because I think we were meant to press City more than I felt we did. I think we're set up to press City more than we did because of the aggressive positioning of Noni and Sancho, because they were like, remember the way we played Liverpool, or the way Liverpool played us, that four, and the way they play normally, that 4-4-2-4 press, that very narrow front four to be able to transition into a man-to-man press. Everyone goes at the end of the day. So that's what it looked like. And Noni and Sancho weren't too concerned initially with Gvardiol and Nunes, which were the wide wing backs. What do you think about that too?
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot, and two things or 2 points I'd like to discuss on 2 points specifically, or just elaborate a bit further. Firstly, on City's perspective, yeah, they employed a 2-3-5 structure, and I thought it it suited them. It suited them because of the players they had on the field, namely Phil Foden and their new signing Omar Marmoush, who I've watched a bit in the Bundesliga. Yeah, I thought it suited them really well. They played really well, especially Foden. He moved quite a lot. And Nunes and Guardiola on either side as the fullbacks, but essentially, as you said, playing as wingers. Um, yeah, they were holding the width, and it's something John McKenzie has discussed in his videos and threads recently, where it's something even you've mentioned, where Pep Guardiola returned to using high and wide fullbacks, and he used them to pin Chelsea back, especially later on in the game. I find what you say about Chelsea's out of possession approach interesting. That you thought Maresca set them up to press aggressively, because this isn't something that I observed. So it's good that, I think this is the great benefit of having a podcast where, or just anything where we're having a conversation, sharing our thoughts to one another, because clearly over here you've picked up something that maybe I've not. Anyway, yeah, I think that's interesting because there were moments Chelsea did transition to a man-to-man press, or at least with a -1 high press. But that quickly changed, and I've seen you comment on Twitter as well that you thought Chelsea was set up initially really well, but we just didn't carry it out properly enough. And so yeah, that's a very interesting point. I'd like to know why. Was it maybe uh the personnel deciding themselves on the spot, in terms of they didn't want to go against the manager's demands, but I think maybe it was a game state um, situation, or consequence, because that's something I want to really discuss in detail as well. Because once Chelsea go 1-0 up through Kusanov, um, he's only 20 years old, and it was his misguided, or a header which lacked the power to send it back to Edison, got intercepted and then converted by Noni Madueke. After that moment is when I've put a lot of focus on into my analysis, because I thought I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. Um, I thought that in that moment when City were on the back foot, Chelsea only spent about like a couple minutes, or at most about 5 minutes, trying to press high, but they didn't really carry that out really well. So I'd like to know your thoughts on why Chelsea reverted to a more passive approach, because I just thought when City were on the back foot, City were really struggling to get a foothold on the game. You could see that with Bernardo Silva dropping even deeper to help Kusanov as well. You could see City were under pressure. You could feel it in the stadium as well. Like even just watching it on the TV, I felt like you could feel the tension in the stadium, and I thought that was a moment for Chelsea to capitalize on. And something City have been susceptible to this season as well is that once they go down a goal, they're likely to concede another goal. And we saw that with Palmer and Nicholas Jackson almost coming close. So I'd like to hear your perspective on why Chelsea fell into a passive mid-block shape, and with that high line, it was just so detrimental as well.
Yeah, that's a very good question because that's a question on everybody's minds. And as you were critical about we not putting our foot on the neck of City at that point in time, where Kuzanov made a few mistakes, and when Kuzanov got the ball, Jackson to race towards Kuzanov a couple of times after the goal, relies on at the end of the day. But I thought even though Bernardo Silva helped out, came deep to help Kuzanov to I think Sancho was meant to press Kuzanov at that point in time. Then because Bernardo Silva was behind Jackson, Jackson did not really rush to Kuzanov. So because of the awareness of Bernardo Silva behind it. So at that point, I expected Sancho to rush or immediately aggressively press Kuzanov. And at that point, Kukurea would press Nunez, then Enzo would have been on Foden. So at that point, when I saw that, at that point, Sancho did not go. I was not like, Sancho, you have to go here. I think I saw Noni do a lot of that because when the ball went to who was the left center back there, Akanji, a lot of the time Noni races immediately to press Akanji. That would trigger the rest of the front line to continue to go press one-on-one, man-to-man. So those little moments, those little details just make City have more of the ball and gain more confidence, which they did throughout that period. So we failed to capitalize on that. And at that point, okay, I'll get to the other tweak that I don't know whether it was Maresca that did it or the players themselves, but at that point, that's what happened.
Yeah, that's interesting because I felt like that set the tone for the remaining period of not just the first half. I mean, mainly the first half, where we allowed City to get back into the game, and that was my main criticism, or that was my main point. Where I didn't mind if, for example, Chelsea tried to press high for about, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes and then reverted back to their initial setup of setting up passively and defending passively. But it's just that I was very frustrated, especially during the game, that Chelsea didn't take that initiative at that moment. And I think that's something Enzo Maresca will reflect on. Because the initial setup, like I've really contemplated on over the past few days, was whether the initial organization and initial tactics that Maresca set up, was it the right way to go forward or not? It's something that I've not really come to a conclusion on because there's just so many trade-offs, right? Like whenever we talk about football tactics, it's always about trade-offs. It's always about what are you willing to sacrifice for a certain upside? And that's always the case with any system. So my point being, Chelsea setting up passively was mainly to contain Haaland, which is a sensible thing to do, obviously, because of the quality of a striker he is, especially when teams go man to man, and this is something we'll come on to later. Um, but the issue for me was if you're setting up passively in a 4-4-2, allowing players like Haaland and Marmoush and Foden to run behind, then your defensive lines should consequentially drop a little deeper. Because I thought it was too high at times, where it was too easy for. I remember especially I think it was Marmoush who created the first proper chance for City. I believe he was just offside though, so it doesn't officially register as a chance. But the first move where they tried to push forward, you could see Marmoush trying to exploit that, and there were countless times and opportunities after that moment where City tried to utilize that route to goal, and I thought they were fairly successful, although they did not score as well. And this helps us come to the next issue with the passive mid block is when the fullbacks are pushing higher and when City's number 8/10s, which is Marmoush and Foden, are holding the fullbacks in the half space, there's a lot of space left in the wings, right? And that allows for access for those fullbacks/wingers to exploit the high line. And that's what we saw with Josko Gvardiol. It wasn't just the goal that I'm talking about. It's about the numerous chances prior to that where Noni Madueke was tasked to handle him. And we especially saw that when John McKenzie mentioned this as well, where there's a moment in the game where there's a break in play, and Enzo Maresca communicates to Enzo Fernandez, who tells Noni Madueke to now mark Josko Gvardiol. But his his defensive awareness just wasn't there. And I must add this with a huge caveat that he's obviously not a defender. He's a winger tasked to perform defensive responsibilities. Nevertheless, like he's admitted in previous interviews as well, that's just the nature of the tactical environment right now. And I thought he carried out his responsibilities in the first half really, really poorly. although I understand that to a certain extent, I don't think there's any excuse for that. And that especially costs our first goal. So yeah, that was the main issue with the pass and mid block is where you need all 11 players to do their duties, and this obviously includes the goalkeeper as well because you've got to perform well as a sweeper keeper. We'll come to the goalkeeper later, but yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts on everything that I've just touched upon so far.
You actually summed it up well because I was also about to talk about the moment. I did see, I think the one you mentioned, John McKenzie telling, saying Enzo told Enzo, and Maresca told Enzo. So I was looking for that. I probably skipped my mind, but I saw that, and Noni did start the game on Guardiola, defending, tracking Gvardiol's run. Sorry. So later in the game, later in the first half, I could notice that because Gvardiol's run started becoming a problem, and I do not know, and that at that point we didn't press as much as we should. I think that's when Enzo just said, okay, no need, stay on him and track his runs much better, or track him, stay on him. But at that point, I remember when we normally do that, even when Leicester did that, when one of the wingers and forms the defensive line and becomes like a 5-4-1 at times, I noticed that the lines are usually the line is usually deeper. It's not usually that high of a line. I remember the last time we did that was against Real Madrid in preseason, where the winger drops deep, joins the back line, becomes a five at the back, but it was too high against Real Madrid, and you could see how they dismantled us. They dismantled us because of that. So I was surprised to see it again, that it was so high, especially because we have lost a forward presser. It was meant to be a 4-2 press. I mean, starting aggressively 4-2. So at that point, Akanji especially, because Akanji, Gundogan, that side, Noni left. Because if Noni was there, he would have pressed either one of them. At times when he started the game, he was pressing Gundogan and he was pressing Akanji. So to see Noni drop deep, it meant the space Gundogan was getting was quite a lot. And I saw Caicedo trying to make up for the space at times by pressing Gundogan at times. But it wasn't enough because Caicedo also has to be mindful of Marmoush behind him and folding, and that it was meant to be the defensive screen. So I did see the sense in dropping Noni that deep whilst keeping that high line and allowing City to have more space to play those balls in behind us. The line should have dropped deeper, as you have said as well, because at that point we are more passive. So, okay, choose one: be actually passive or press. Either one of them, not in the middle. That's what we did. We sat in the middle and allowed City to press. At that point, I when I saw that, I was like, I didn't really notice it exactly until I rewatched, of course. But when I saw that moment where City started putting long balls in behind us, I was like, it's a matter of time, just a matter of time before one comes in. Because I think there was one chance where Gvardiol missed the 1v1 against Sanchez, and I went in the middle of James and went from Nani side to that past the middle of James and the centre back. So when I saw that, I was like, anything can happen. And that's the thing about highlines. And that's why I struggle to blame individuals for highlines, because as much as you can train it, as we have seen Barcelona this season, you can train highlines very well. Barcelona has the best highline in Europe, as we have seen, but they can still get caught out because it's something that you need timed runs for as much as you need. But Nonizo was quite a bit lazy in that sense of not knowing, or it was too deep, trying to overtrack the run. I don't know, but it was quite deeper than the rest, obviously. So, but at that point, I don't think that's what really annoyed me about that goal. It was more of the the fact that Guardiola had to run from behind Noni to get to the ball, and Noni didn't anticipate and get to the ball before Guardiola. That annoyed me about the goal, because he's meant to be tracking that run as he sees Guardiola running. He's meant to be tracking that, and he normally does well, does that well. So I was surprised that he could let that slip in, and to show how much he does it normally before in the second half, it looked like Noni's it was laser focused on Guardiola throughout the whole
Yeah.
second half. So it could be a concentration issue there.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah. A few points. Additionally, I think you've alluded to or explained. Firstly, the Chelsea's passive. Trust me, this was the last time I'm going to talk about Chelsea being passive. But um, yeah, Chelsea being passive out of possession also meant that City could allow for their rotations. We saw plenty of rotations because that's what City can do, right? Like you sit off them, trying to block off space and try to man mark a few players. They'll try to pull your entire structure apart, and we saw City trying to do that, and effectively carrying that out to a fair extent as well. And I think you framed it really well, where Chelsea were caught between two defensive setups in a way, where you're playing a high line, but you're staying passive. That raises a huge question mark, and City just really exploited that. And on top of this, I'd like to also touch upon a point that it's something I came across right before we started the pod, actually. I've mentioned this account before on Twitter. They're called TactX, and they shared this clip of how Chelsea defensively recovered, as in defensively recovered during a transition phase. So this is a defensive transition after losing the ball in City's half. And you could just see how labored the players were. They just weren't switched on. I don't know if you could call it being lazy off the ball, lack of concentration, lack of defensive awareness, or just a mix of everything altogether. Where that's another aspect of our game which we need to improve on. And again, this is a topic like Chelsea's defensive issues is a whole nother topic as well. But I think we're covering a lot of that in this pod. So with all of these complaints from everyone at halftime about Chelsea being passive,
yeah.
Maresca switched it up at halftime. So, Soon, could you tell us about what Chelsea did now out of possession, and what were the drawbacks of the system which City exploited?
Yeah, so at halftime, there's something I also tweeted today as well, that Maresca probably has one of the best and most consistent starting setups in the league, in the sense that anytime he starts a game, his team very clearly knows what to do against each opponent, to what to where the spaces to attack, the how to defend and everything, because he knows how to prepare his team for each game. So, and I also say at times, most times too, he does that very well at second halves. If he sees something that didn't work in the first half, he changes it in the second half. And I think he did against City as well, because he kept immediately he changed it to a man-to-man setup, basically man-to-man marking setup. Um, each man to his man. Noni kept himself on Rovadio. Sancho started to press. Instead of Sancho to press and be wary of Nunes, Sancho was tasked with pressing Kuzanov, while Jackson was on Akanji. I think Jackson was on, or I think Palmer was on Akanji. Then Jackson was mindful of Kovacic. And it was more mindful of Kovacic, because Kovacic did that thing in the first half where when he dropped in between the lines or in behind Jackson and Palmer, no one could track him at times, and that was a problem too, because Kovacic could just carry the ball as he can, and it caused problems. So that's how it was. It was a man-to-man setup, and Chelsea tried to press City back a lot of the time. And I remember like the first 10 to 15 minutes of that second half that City couldn't really play out. out of the back. They tried a lot of short passes, and Chelsea stopped them every single time. Then at that point, that's probably a benefit of a manager being with the same players for quite a long time, or the players being with the same manager for a long time, because the team naturally has different solutions for different points. I think Pep even mentioned it. So that they tried to play out now the time, but they couldn't in that second half. So what do? We said, okay, let's play it directly to Haaland, because Haaland can be able to hold up the ball route one, as we know. Haaland can be able to hold up the ball. We trust Haaland to do that and start the attacks from there. And it proved to be very useful. And it's very interesting because it also coincides. I think early in the second half, we started doing that. When Ederson started to play the ball to Haaland, Chelsea quite handled it a bit. They handled it quite well. Maybe made Haaland go wide and receive wide instead of direct. Then what puzzled me is at that point in time where it was still 1-1, and we felt I could understand the sub in the sense that Jackson messed up some 1v1, some transition moments actually. Messed up some transition moments. And the coach decided that Jackson should come off on Google. I was shocked because the first question I asked was that would Nkunku press the same way? Nkunku help us continue to press City the same way? Because at times Jackson had to force Ederson onto his right foot, and that didn't make it easy for him to play some of those long balls to Haaland that's accurately. So immediately Nkunku came on, I was skeptical because I understand what the manager was trying to do for Jackson, because I think JJ said the same thing of it's also a very good account on Twitter.
Yeah.
Talked about the fact that maybe he's trying to send a message to Jackson that you can't just get away with this kind of performances and I'll keep you on the pitch. So, but if not, Nkunku added zilch to our press. He added a negative man to our press because he didn't. At that point, we stopped pushing City back as much. At that point, City, for us to push City back, City had to decide to go back, because I remember Stones was waiting for the press. It was basically begging for the press, baiting the press, holding on to the ball until he gave Ederson in that move for Haaland's goal, where Ederson gave Haaland, and our centre backs could not handle him. It could not handle him at all because they kept slipping everywhere. They couldn't handle him so much. Chalobah at times did, but it was probably too late, like late in the half. At that point, maybe you'd have thought about toasting before the game, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because the issue was, so Chelsea pressed the goalkeeper as well, right? At least that's what I thought the intent was to press the goalkeeper. So that would leave Chelsea technically -1 shot in City's first phase. But the thing was, there was a bit of inconsistency with pressing the goalkeeper, and that Edison's so good with the ball that there's another dilemma where if you sit off him, he'll find those long balls and his accuracy is pretty ridiculous. Yeah, just really top work. But if you try and press him and you've left a spare City man, they'll build through with short passes. So the thing was, since City had the 1v1, mainly Haaland against Colwill or Haaland against Chalobah, Edison tried to launch those long passes, and that's where we see both goals coming from. The first one is the ball over the top. Haaland gets a flick on, and then the whole Sanchez error. I don't think we have the time to
My goodness,
talk
Sanchez.
talk about that
My
in detail.
goodness.
I think that says everything. What you just said explains everything. But there's that happens, and then the third goal comes with a long ball to Kevin De Bruyne. De Bruyne flicks it to Haaland. Chalobah gets attracted to Haaland, although Colwill is already marking him, that leaves Foden free. Foden goes through, goal. That's 3-1. So yeah, so the man-to-man eventually, again, we need to talk about player
Got
execution as
Admand.
well. Yeah, we need to talk about player execution as well, because although we talked about all the drawbacks of the game plan here, we kind of left out the lack of execution by the Chelsea players as well, where irrespective of which system you put and you set your team up, if your players don't carry out the responsibilities that you're supposed to, is something Johan mentioned as well after the game, then that just uh, uh, ruins or makes your tactical setups just null and void. Like there's no use to it, right? And then another
Yeah.
thing we haven't really touched upon as well is Chelsea's inefficiency in offensive transitions. Whenever we got won the ball, we didn't create anything. Like we talked about the defensive issues, but if you look at their XG as well, if I'm not wrong, it was 0.18 in the second half. And in the first half, apart from the Kusanov error leading to the goal, we didn't create much. If I'm not wrong, apart from that chance and Jadon Sancho's chance, which was after the whole Palmer Nicholas Jackson error, we only created around 0.68 XG. So that's really, really poor from an offensive perspective as well. This just elucidates how much uh, just many aspects of the game that didn't go well. So yeah, I think we've covered almost everything apart from like the few we've touched on. So I'd like to know your final thoughts and your outlook onto the next Chelsea game.
Okay. On that, you're very right because I noticed a lot of transition moments. A lot of the attackers were off. I would say Bar Jackson and probably Noni
Mm,
and their simple touches that they normally do and to receive the ball. Palmer Palmer kept on having heavy touches. I was like, what's happening to you
mhm.
today? It tried to chest the ball one time, and the chest went about 5 yards. I was like, that
Yeah.
was a transition opportunity at that point. So Palmer was really off. A lot of his passes round the corner to Noni were were very long, were very off as well. So Sancho too couldn't really get past his man Nunes. It didn't really it couldn't. And I've actually argued a bit that our wingers are a bit isolated in some sense because of the fact that they have to, especially with the way we play, transitionally at times. Because when you play transitionally at times, and plus the profile of the eights, Enzo and
Mhm.
Palmer, they might not be able to make those darts um, underlaps like he did his Leicester team used to. So and if you're attacking transitionally, you might not be able to have those eights running at the same pace as the wingers to
Mhm.
create space for them. It might not be easy. It might be easier when the team is in settled possession, trying to break down probably a mid to low block. So, but I felt a lot of the dynamics of Nani created a lot of chances by himself, trying to dribble one or two individuals, put a cross in or put a shot on goal. Um, Sancho could not do that. I think Jackson got chances from transitions, got at the end of chances, and Palmer could. I don't think Palmer did anything of note that game. It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it's not easy for him at times because
Yeah.
he has to be. So he plays a lot of the games. He plays almost 90 minutes every time, and that's why I keep on saying if at times we need to rest him. I felt we needed to rest him against Wolves. I think we
Mhm.
should have beaten Wolves without him. So that's another argument so as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. We've got West Ham next, West Ham at home, so it'll be
Ooh,
at Stamford Bridge. It's on Monday
Graham
night.
Potter.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that completely left my mind. Yeah, return of Graham Potter to the bridge. Yeah, let's see how it goes. Let's hope for a win because the top four race is getting really tight. There's really not much room. We've still got about I think 15 games remaining, if I'm not wrong. So,
reducing.
mm, so much work to do. I think we're in sixth right now as well, which is not ideal, but still many games in hand, many games remaining. So, yeah, let's hope for the best. Thank you, Soon. This has been a great second episode. I think our first episode was good, and I'm happy about
Yeah,
the
it
reception we're
was.
getting online as well.
Thank you, everyone. It was really nice.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone. See you next week.